Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to this week's No Limits a Mid-Trap podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Not much, but it was pretty awesome to see. We got a new patron who's got a t-shirt,
Yay.
Mid-Trap Pod t-shirt coming in the mail. Welcome, Kevin B. Glad to have you.
Welcome, Kevin. Glad to have you on this podcast journey.
Yeah, Kevin's been chatting us up on social media, and he's only 20 or 30 episodes in, so it's kind of cool to have people who are not necessarily keeping up with us episode to episode, but who now have, 60, 70, or even 80 episodes to listen to and to look forward to, who are new to the journey. So he may not hear this shout out for a couple of months, but glad you're tuning in.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about having a podcast, that I think we have episodes that are both, in the moment, but then we have a lot of episodes that you can, obviously our podcast is designed to be an anthology series where this will be here forever. And if someone wants to go read and then immediately listen to this, they can go back and look at that. And so that's one of the nice things about it. Speaking of like podcasts and going back and looking at the podcast itself. So I recently switched, not recently, I guess a couple months back, I switched from using Apple Music, Apple Pod to Spotify Pod. And there they don't have any sort of rate or review system yet. But for some reason today, I found myself on Apple Podcasts for some reason. And I went and I looked at our pod and I looked at the reviews and I was surprised at how many reviews we actually had. And then it was cool to see someone just like on Sunday posted a nice long comment. So we just wanted to give a quick shout out to some of these nice comments that I've failed to see. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, when you said that and I opened up the app, it's just so funny how little, somewhat meaningless things can just turn your day around. 53 ratings, almost every one 5 stars. Looks like 1 4-star rating. Yeah,
Probably Kevin Smith.
Lee. Yeah, Tom Smith, right? General Kevin Lee, though, on Sunday wrote, quote, "I see Mitch rap 2 or 3 times a year when a new book comes out. But with this podcast, I get to see Mitch every week. Chris and Mike have great insight and have grown my love of the series and expanded my library, introducing me to many more authors. Just let Mitch be Mitch." Dude, I love that. Thank you, General. General Kevin Lee. I think he's a real general.
I don't know. I hope so. That'd be sick.
That'd be cool.
So I'll say it now instead of saying it at the end. So please subscribe, rate, and review using Apple Podcasts, I guess, or your favorite podcasting platform. We will read them eventually, and we appreciate it very much.
It's pretty simple, too. I don't use Apple Podcasts myself, but I opened it up, searched for us, clicked on it, and if you scroll to the bottom, there's 5 stars. You can tap it right there. It says write a review. You can type a comment right on your phone. And I think all iPhones come with Apple Podcasts installed, so it's not like you're downloading anything. So
yeah,
quick and easy, and it means a lot to us. So thank you.
What do you use? Do you listen to Spotify?
I got this random app, Overcast. Yeah, I don't know where I found it. I've had it for
years.
You
use some like random app. No, yeah, I don't know what it is, but of course, like Mike, if you guys knew Mike like I knew Mike, he would be the one to use this like random third-party app.
Yep. And then I tell everybody about it.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't stop until like 40 people I know downloaded it.
You probably told me about it back in college when I wasn't listening to podcasts. And now I feel like we're going on a tangent here and I'll wrap it up. But do you ever feel anxiety about the amount of podcasts that you haven't listened to?
Speaking of Tom Smith, no, I don't. I honestly, I kind of like that I have a bunch to catch up on because, I do the double speed. And Overcast lets you go up to 3 times speed.
You convinced me. I'm now at 1.8 speed on all podcasts.
We're busy people, all right?
It's so efficient. It's so efficient.
Thank you. Exactly. And I understand the trade-off. If you lose the quality or like the efficacy of you can't keep up and get the information. But a nice 1.8 speed, even double speed, most podcasts, you can still process everything. So, yeah, you save some time. No, but Tom Smith asked me that. He was like, you guys should be nervous about front-loading a bunch of episodes because we had hoped to release like 5 episodes the first week we launched to give people something to listen to. I was like, I think people are going to want content. Like, I don't want to launch one episode and people got to wait a week or two if we're slow. And he's like, no, it would cause anxiety. I'm like, anxiety? He's like, yeah, podcast anxiety. When you subscribe to an app, and if there's a bunch of episodes you haven't listened to, you don't get into it because it makes you nervous that you're too far behind. I'm like, hadn't thought of that.
No, it's definitely a thing. Like I'll have to go through, and sometimes, like I'll just give you one example. I subscribe to the BBC World Service, so they pump out two 30-minute podcasts a day.
Wow.
And those, unlike ours, they're new. So if one from a month ago is going to be very, very stale, right. Obviously. So, but if I see that there's like 10 of them that I haven't listened to this week, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go, or I gotta go and delete them. Like, I don't know. I'm a freak like that. So anyways, we're rambling.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It's definitely a thing. Podcast anxiety. If anyone else who listens to us has podcast anxiety, write us in, and I understand how you feel.
I got to be honest. I get that because of thriller anxiety. There are some series out there.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I want to read.
I won't touch.
Right. I want to read, and I know are amazing, but I'm hesitant because I'm embarrassed in the sense that I haven't read any of them, or I read one 7, 8, 15 years ago, and I'm like, oh, I can't read that one because I don't know the rest of the series, and I'm too far behind. If I read one, I'm going to want to read all 12, and, yeah, I get that.
My father-in-law wanted to listen to our podcast on some books, but then he doesn't know where he is in the series, and he doesn't want to go back. Like, he's too anxious to go back and reread everything. And I was like, oh, I'll buy you. I can lend you my ARC back when I had it. I don't know if you're allowed to. Actually, I wasn't going to lend him my ARC if I got in trouble for that. Anyways,
sorry, David.
And he was like, "Oh, I don't know where I am, and I can't go back. I don't have time to go back." So it's a thing. It's a thing.
Hey, just to change the story here. Nice tree you got back there.
Oh yeah, thanks,
dude. That thing is massive.
It's not that big. It's not that big. It was a Douglas fir. It was like $75. I don't know. I've never paid this much for a tree. Oh no, actually, last year I paid more, and I had to cut it down myself.
Ooh, that sounds fun, though. I like that.
It was fun, but I thought it was going to be cheaper that I was cutting it down myself.
Because you go out to a farm or something? Or
yeah, in Ithaca, we lived right down the street from this huge tree farm. It was fun. Patrick had a blast. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's time we talk thrillers, and it's time we talk Mitch Rapp. I know you're going to give us the rundown because we are getting into Enemy of the State.
Yes, this is our penultimate book. In at least this series, until we come back and add an episode when next year's book comes on. But yeah, so this is going to be Enemy of the State, not to be confused with Enemy at the Gates. Every time I wanted to text you or write something down, I just write Enemy at the Gates,
right? Because
of the book. It's very interesting how the title is. They chose to do a title so similar to another title of the book. But anyways,
right.
Yeah, and I feel like this is very much so a follow, this. I view this book along with Order to Kill and Red War as a trilogy. There's not much Russia stuff going on in this book, but because of Grisha being in it and being playing a major role, and obviously a continuation immediately from the last story. So yeah, I view these three as a 3-book arc. This got pretty standard reviews on Goodreads, 4.29. Not that many Amazon ratings. Very interesting. Most of the Amazon ratings I've pulled are in the 5,000s to 6 to 7,000s. But this one is in the low. I don't know why. Wish we had some AWS analytics on this, but we don't. And so the Goodreads summaries goes like this. After 9/11, the United States made one of the most secretive and dangerous deals in its history. The evidence against the powerful Saudis who coordinated the attack would be burned. In return, King Faisal would promise to keep the oil flowing and the deals with conspirators in its midst. When the king's own nephew is discovered funding ISIS, the president suspects that the Saudis never intended to live up to their agreement. He decides that the royalty needs to be sent a message and that Mitch Rapp is just the man to deliver it. The catch: America can't be seen moving against an ally. Rapp will be on his own, forced to make decisions that will change his life forever. Rapp quits the CIA and assembles a group of independent contractors to help him complete the mission. They've barely begun unraveling connections between the Saudi government and ISIS when the brilliant new head of intelligence director discovers their efforts. With Rapp getting too close, he threatens to go public with the details of the post-9/11 agreement between two countries. Facing an international incident that could end his political career, the president orders American intelligence agencies to join Saudi efforts to hunt the former CIA man down. Rapp, supported only by his team of mercenaries with dubious allegiances, finds himself at the center of the most elaborate manhunt in history. It's only a matter of time before he's caught or killed. Will it be enough to turn the tables on the Saudis and clear his name? That's a gripping, summary right there.
Yeah, it kind of gives a lot away.
It does.
In that, I mean, on the reread, I'm halfway through the book, to prepare for part 1 here. And obviously I know what happens. But most of the summary really doesn't even happen in the first half of the book. So, and I mean, the title is Enemy of the State. So I guess if it's your first time reading, you're like, is that Rapp? Is that someone else? You would have never suspected to be Rapp. But then you read this on the dust jacket or on a review page, and boom, there it is. The president has to turn on Rapp, and this first half is kind of setting the stage of why that moment has to come. Why it gets that bad.
Yeah, we're actually going to go up to, which is roughly halfway through the book, the point where we haven't even seen him begin to undergo his mission, and we're not going to talk about the president turning on him and whatnot. So there's going to be a large chunk of the plot of this book that is in the second half of the book.
Right.
But I feel like I wanted to sort of, or we'd agreed to sort of stop it to only talk about the first 24, 25 chapters or so, because there's a lot to talk about here. One, I think the whole scene in Iraq and Mitch going back and having this moment, I think that really, I like that story, and we're gonna get into that. I think it follows up well to the praise we gave of the scene with Lala.
In Order to Kill. Yep.
In Order to Kill, and then what I'm calling is this Ocean's 11 style team up, get the gang back together. Breaking down these characters that we've seen before, and that now are coming back into our life. Some that are recent, and some that are, from the way back. So yeah, I think that'd be cool. And obviously setting the stage with some of these Saudi players, as well as Halabi, who we know will become a major player in a future book.
Yeah, this book surprised me because it has so much connective tissue. Like you mentioned it, we're
a lot of connective tissue.
In Iraq, we're on the ground where Rapp is rendezvousing with Ghaffar, Muhammad, Lale's brother, and this other ragtag band of freedom fighters in Iraq who are trying to oppose ISIS. Well, ISIS now has turned on them. They're, known enemies. And so Rapp, he feels motivated. It's not even that he is authorized to or is told to. He makes it his mission to go in there. He actually para-jumps in, which was kind of cool, and then hikes across the desert. That was a really cool chapter. I love seeing Rapp do that kind of stuff. It just reminds us he's not military trained, but Stan Hurley gave him so much more.
But that was also a nod to some of the stuff that Vince would write in the very beginning, and then it sort of got pushed aside, and he became way more of a spy as opposed to this operative, that can do both the spycraft, but also can
the guerrilla warfare stuff,
can jump out of some of the best parts of the book we hate the most are when he's doing what is it, separation of power,
executive power in the jungle.
Executive power, right? Exactly. Him the best part of the book is when he's doing that military stuff,
even a commando.
Even though he was never in the military,
Yeah. And that scene almost made me think Vietnam. Oh yeah, Rapp's skill set would have thrived in that operating environment. This one is the guerrilla warfare of these cities in the Middle East with these bombed out buildings. And he grabs a shard of concrete at one point off some exposed rebar and tosses it to create a distraction. I feel that close quarters combat, we're also seeing his skill set there. And to bring up Stan Hurley, Kyle mentions him briefly and says
He does.
a parajumper may not need an exact landing, right? You'd have an error or a margin of error in which if you land in this zone, you're good. Well, Stan Hurley made him, he said, as you're parajumping in, I'm going to stand right here. And if you can't kick me in the face when you land, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. So I feel like Stan Hurley's just training rap. And I love that throwback.
No, that was great. This scene also reminded me of the very first time we met Mitch when he's in that town in
Bandar Bas.
Bandar Bas. And, you know, he just blends in so well. Obviously here he's trying to not be hidden, but, you know, he knows that he could walk into the city and, you know, because he says he gets rid of all of his stuff, right? He wants to keep some things.
He buries
it.
To
get rid of it. He buries it because if he gets caught, you know. I don't know. This was just very much. And I feel like this whole book a lot of times is called further cementing, you know, that Kyle knows his stuff.
Right.
Sort of bringing it back to where the Survivor was. Kind of, we talked about this, where you could tell Kyle did all this research and he wanted to like add this connective tissue between him and Vince. And I feel like we're coming back to that, where maybe Order to Kill didn't have that much.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, but here's an interesting take. I think he's also connecting it to Order to Kill, which is something Vince would have done, having even if it's not a full 2-book arc where the plots rely on one another, at least these in-between chapters bring the stories together.
Right.
Like
it's a wrapping up of the story.
Right. Like Lala's story arc, he never had to tell Muhammad, the brother, that he was the one who shot her. We hear in this scene that it's weighing heavily on his mind, and he knew at some point he was going to have to come clean and say what he did. And so to have that closure when he gets to this town, he meets up with the crew, and they're driving to an exfil to get the guys out. Muhammad's like, you never said what happened to Lala. Did they kill her? And Rap had to say, she went down. She wasn't going to go without a fight. She took the ISIS leader out as she was dying. And you and I both know what they would have done to her is way worse. And she wanted to go on her own terms. And so I took her life to spare her. And Muhammad comes to peace with that and actually thanks Mitch for it. And, you know, like, is that going to affect this book and this plot? No. Was it an awesome nugget? Was it an awesome Easter egg for people who were fresh on Order to Kill? Yes. And does it bring some continuity? Because I think what makes the Mitch Rapp series stand out, the action's awesome. The character building is awesome. The political scenes are always awesome. Everything's great. But what brings it to the next level, you know, it really levels up when you have a continuous story going on through all 20 whatever books. And I feel like little things like that just make you feel like you are with Mitch in the arc of his life. You're not just going on these haphazard adventures here and there that are all disjointed. Things like that just keep the series flowing book to book, even if every single thing in the plot doesn't connect. These things make it feel like a real timeline.
Mm-hmm. It's just like what Kyle said in his latest interview. It's something for, obviously, for the new readers, but then something greater for the people who have been here for, what is this, 17 books or 16 books, whatever.
Right.
This will be book 17. Yeah.
So does this book, particularly closure like that, Rap getting his guys out of Iraq, and a couple other things that happen here, some things with Claudia, and then some things with President Alexander. Does all this make Order to Kill a better book? Imagine if you read this half of Enemy of the State as the last third of Order to Kill.
Let's table that till at the end of the pod.
I think it makes it a better book, though. I think we'll see that by the end.
Okay. All right.
I actually think of Order to Kill better having read this half of the book.
What's funny that you said that is like I had that exact thought when I like, you know, today I stopped at, you know, chapter like 38, whatever, and I'm like, I like Order to Kill better now, and I think that's why I remembered Order to Kill being better than when we were so down on the book, and it's like but why were we so down on this
Because we
book?
wanted this.
Yeah, and I think like, because we knew this, like in
Mhm.
the past, we didn't, and we obviously when we were reading it before, we didn't have this critical, one snapshot. All right, let's dissect this book by itself.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And
again,
that picks up
Order to Kill gets better and better.
right, and that picks up with our next topic because a huge part of this book and the opening of it is with the Saudis. And something we
Yes.
said at Order to Kill was a nuke went off in Saudi Arabia. What's the fallout?
Exactly.
This whole Saudi Arabia thing was like a side story because we were in Pakistan earlier and now we're here. But it comes full circle looking at the fallout of the Saudi Arabia attack. One of their rogue princes who disagrees with King Faisal being too friendly with the Americans and with American intelligence, he goes rogue and he's funding ISIS. And so the opening scene is he's in Rabat, Morocco, and he's trying to hand off $1 million to an ISIS general. So I feel like that's something I wanted to see at the end of Order to Kill, and boom, Kyle opens the prelude with it.
And we have, the people who are following this prince are a new leader. We have
Joe Maslick.
Or he's not new, but he's now new to the lead, right?
Yeah.
Joe Maslick. And that is a direct consequence of the events of the last book.
Right. Scott going down.
Scott's been taken down. Someone else has to take the lead. Normally, obviously, this would be Scott running point. And there's direct consequences for having Joe Maslick be. First of all, he doesn't want to be there. I like his scene where he's just like reason 42, reason, and then he gets up to like reason 50 why he shouldn't be here. And if Scott was in that lead, they would have taken. Do you think they would have? I want to ask you this: if Scott was there or Mitch was there, well, we know if Mitch was there, he would have taken the prince. But if Scott was there, would he have taken the prince?
Yeah. So let's set the stage though, because huge moment. Did Maslick mess up? Or did he make the right call? So the team's watching. You got Charlie Wicker in sniping position, and his feed is being relayed back to the folks at Langley. And down his scope, they're like, whoa, we thought a guy called the Egyptian, some ISIS financier, was the guy coming in with the money, who's going to drop off the money and handle the exchange. All of a sudden, a Mercedes S-Class with a bunch of guards rolls in.
Yeah.
And he's like, whoa, were we expecting $100,000 vehicle rolled up? And then Maz is like, oh man, it's sitting low on its shocks, so it's got armor. So this is an armored $100,000 car. Who are we messing with? Well, they're about to take him because he meets with the guy. He hands off the money. They know he's funding ISIS. They're about to take him. And at the last minute, Charlie Wicker says, Maz, we got confirmation from Langley. That's a Saudi prince.
70% confirmation.
Yeah, we got 70% chance that the photo matches a Saudi prince, a direct relation to the king, and pretty close. I think maybe first cousin or something.
His favorite sister's nephew, or
right, exactly.
Son, so his nephew, yeah,
his nephew, right. And that's when Maz is like, dude, we got to make the call. We're going to take him in 5 seconds. Is it a go? Is it an abort? And Maz goes, I never signed up for this. Like, I could be in the hot seat. He even says, like, if anybody's going to take the fall for this, it's going to be me. I don't have the cover Mitch Rapp does, or
sure.
Irene Kennedy does. I don't have the president's phone number on speed dial. Like, I don't have all these senators a blackmail on them. He's like, this is going to fall on me. Abort, abort, abort. And like, he does it, and he says, fuck, I should never have even been put in this position. Mitch ain't going to be too happy about that. So let's see. Was it the right call? I'm going to say yes, it was the right call.
Yes.
You do not want to be the one when the intel changes on the op. You do not want to be the one without time to get higher authorities assassinating or capturing an ally, a diplomatic ally in the government with a family connection to a king. Like, it would cause a shitstorm. So I think he made the right call. Should he have taken him? Would Mitch, Scott, or anybody else have taken him? Absolutely, they would have taken him. Mitch even says, I don't give a fuck. That was the mission. Whoever it was, they're funding terrorists. We're going to capture their ass. We're going to torture their ass. But I think it just highlights that's not what Maz signed up for. It's not who Maz is. And it was totally viable that he would make that call, which I think was the right call. Obviously, it's not the one we want to cheer for. We like when Mitch does these kinds of antics. But if this were real life, I think he made the right call with the intelligence at the time that came in.
I think he even says that, we're about to kill these 2 guards, and they're probably just some, from the embassy, because I think they see that it's diplomatic plates, right?
It was
like,
an embassy vehicle. Exactly.
Embassy vehicle. So they're like, these are just 2. They probably don't even know who they're driving around, and like that could be me right there,
Right.
driving around some diplomat. I think he made the right call. I agree with you that Mitch would have 100% done it. I don't know if Scott probably would have done it, but he would have done it differently than the way Mitch would have done it.
Absolutely.
Mitch would have just taken the guy, shot the 2 guards. I don't know if he would have shot the 2 guards, but because Mitch does
he would have
incapacitated them for sure.
He would have said, "Take out their knees,"
right,
or something. Yeah.
But this is a funny thing though, because like after this happens, or I thought it was funny how like Matt sort of hides out in Europe for a while, and then when he comes back, he's like avoiding Mitch like at all cost. And then like eventually there's a scene where like Mitch goes and sees them at like the SEAL demolition and salvage, and Maz is like too scared to even look at Mitch, and all Mitch has to do is just go like, "What's up?" And then like you could see Maz like
ooh, relief.
Ooh, yeah, relief.
The nod, yeah.
Yeah. There was just some like some of the humor in this book, and I like the humor that Kyle's brought to the series. We mentioned it a couple times, but you could it really came through in the first half of this book.
Dude, absolutely. And this is exactly some of the stuff we were clamoring for at the end of Order to Kill. And I mean, Kyle knew to give it to us. He knew it. He knew we wanted it.
He knew it.
Yep. All right, so what else is going on besides Rapp in Iraq getting his team out? So he's not in this mission. Mazlik kind of dropping the ball, one would say, and they don't capture the guy who's funding ISIS. Scott's out.
So I guess the Scott being out leads to this tension where, Rapp comes back, he's on the home front, and he gets accosted by a couple of different people in wanting Claudia to join. Obviously, Maz shouldn't have been involved with this. Scott's slipping because he's, he can't do it. He needs someone to help him with either replace him and then they come up with this sort of brilliant idea. Scott had both the ops and the muscle. So, or like the logistics and the ops. So that they need, let's create 2 positions and let's try to replace each one. And he wants the logistics side with, someone who did it for years for her husband, the crazy assassin Louis Gould, and trying to get Claudia. And so there's a couple different instances where, Scott directly asks Mitch. Mitch says no. Right. Irene asks Mitch. Mitch says no. Claudia asks Mitch like a couple different times, and Mitch says no. There's this interesting tension between the 2 of them, and you can see how Kyle wants to begin to build further this relationship that he already had stemming from the previous 2 books, and obviously fulfilling, or coming full circle with this sexual, or not, emotional relationship between him and Claudia, which I think is interesting that he then decides to bring in a previous ex-girlfriend later on in the book, and sort of like lends to like comic relief this tension between like Claudia and Donatella.
Yes. That leads to some good moments in the next half for sure.
Yeah, we got to bring that up next time.
I think it's important you bring up Claudia here, because that conversation of her being brought in and Rapp being so against it allows Kyle to explore Rapp's psyche a bit deeper.
Sure.
Because the obvious reason he's saying no to bring Claudia back is because he cares for her, and anything he's ever cared for goes up in flames, and he feels responsible. And he's like, I've actually enjoyed my relationship with Claudia and having Anna and her in my life, and anything that I take seriously is now going to be a target, and we saw last book, In Order to Kill, again, not to keep bringing it up, they went after Claudia because they knew it meant something to Mitch. And so if she's now working, he would hope she's off limits because it's family, and family should be off limits to a professional, right? To a real professional, not a Louis Gould piece of trash, but a real professional like Rap. People would hope family's off limits, but now she wouldn't just be family; she would be a player, and that could even make her a bigger target. But so the other thing in Rap's psyche is he wants to protect her. He also is feeling a little guilty, and Kyle writes this, and I got a quote here. So now he and Claudia had settled into an uncomfortable, platonic cohabitation that was starting to feel like a low-grade Cold War. Even after so many years, the death of his wife was a raw, bleeding wound. The years had proved that there wasn't much that could kill him. Living through another loss like that might kill him. Like he can't lose her.
Right. Yeah, every time Mitch has tried to open up in the past, post Anna, it's failed, and he feels like maybe this could be something real. And so I could sense why he has apprehension in allowing Claudia to come in. But see, Claudia is different than Anna. Whereas and there's even this scene where we're gonna get to it in a little bit once we set up this whole Saudi plot, where Rap gets a phone call from the president, and she wakes up and is like, oh. And he's like, I gotta go to a meeting. And he's like, oh, okay, there's a list on the fridge. Make sure you get it when you come back. Whereas Anna would have been freaking out. Who called you? Where are you going?
Right.
And then I think there's another scene even later on when he eventually decides to, in the moment where he's deciding, all right, I'm now going to let her in. I've decided, all right, Claudia is going to have to become the ops leader, and not even the ops leader of Scott's team, but actually of Mitch's, black team. I guess they're going rogue, and he's in his inner dialogue is like, I'm not used to having this casual conversations about my mission, and because she keeps pressing him oh, what's going on, what are you doing,
oh, yeah.
What are we doing, and then he finally let's go, and so Claudia is not, obviously she helped Louis Gould rise to being the second or third best assassin in the world, so
right,
she knows her stuff,
and she's gonna get what she wants. She
oh, yeah.
keeps bringing it up, but she's not doing it in a way that's going to set Mitch off. But she does it just enough in a way that lets him know she's dead serious about it.
Right.
He even wonders, was she not at the airport to pick him up when he got back? Was that a message?
Purpose.
And in his mind, he's like, is she trying to send me a signal that I better make a decision of if I want to be with her long term? That's more of the relationship. But he was like, so maybe I got to make a decision. Maybe I got to talk to her. And then he pushes it off. And then she corners him in the gym late at night. And Anna's down there, quote, working out with him. But really just he's doing pull-ups and she's cheering him on. And Claudia's like, go to bed. And she's like, can we talk now? And he's still trying to weasel out of it. He's like, hey, I'm in the middle of working out. And she's like, that's what you call it when you're playing around with a 7-year-old, working out? So, yeah.
His line is like, guess I could cut it short. And she's like, oh, gee, thanks.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If I pulled that shit with my wife, I'd be out on the couch.
All right, here's a line, though. I got to say this one, because talking about the humor with Kyle, Rap's getting pushed and pushed and pushed by Claudia. He knows he has to make a decision. He has to open up with her. And he says, quote, why was it always the strong, defiant women he was attracted to? A doormat would make his life so much easier.
It's so true. That's so true.
But to wrap it up, what is her winning argument? The winning argument is, would the Morocco operation have gone better if you had me involved? And Rap can't deny it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. She would have been on the constant comms. She would have seen that picture first. Right. She could have been able either to get a hold of Irene or, probably made a more definitive judgment call herself. Or she would have kept Irene in the loop. Irene should have been there, seeing that feed,
And she would have been able to identify the prince live time as Charlie's Wicker's looking down the scope.
Sure.
She would have had Irene on the comms to say approve or not approve, and it wouldn't have left Maslick in the hot seat. So the intricacies of things like this and that mission, there's not a whole lot of action. Actually, we didn't say it, but when Rap is extracting the ragtag group from Iraq, there's a quick little action scene where he and Ghaffar, one of the locals, take out like 6 ISIS dudes on a pickup truck.
7
who are patrolling.
7. He says if it's eight or more,
Right.
they can't do it. But it was
board.
7, he's like, they're in luck.
Yep. And Ghaffar goes up to have a smoke with one of the guys. He talks real low, so they all lean in close, making it easier to Mitch to get his shots off. I think he shoots one guy by putting a bullet through another guy, so it hits 2 of them. So yeah, but there's not much action, and then there's this Rabat scene, which doesn't really come to anything because the action gets called off, but it is high stakes in the moment. There's not much action, yet I'm really captivated by the story because of these intricacies and the dialogue. I feel like the dialogue is so strong. This half doesn't need action to carry it.
Yeah.
Because there's no other action scene, is there?
No. Besides, like, so I guess we have failed to mention, I guess, the follow-up to this prince is the Saudis that are behind everything. And they're going to be our main sort of villains, or one of our main villains in this. And so this is the Ali Nasser character and the king. And so there's one like quick little action scene with him when he gets taken by Halabi that we could touch on. But there's not that much action. Do you want to get into talking about Ali Nasser?
I was going to say, I think the way we're talking about these characters and their relationships and their decisions carry the story in a way that the action, I'm fine with it being light on the action. That's because the Ali Nasser character, the Saudi intelligence chief, and his relationship with this prince who's funding ISIS and wants to turn on the king, I feel like it's so strong, their relationship. So yeah, what do you think of these two characters sort of as co-villains? And they're not so co-villains, they're actually playing each other, and they both have very different aims as well. What do you think about their relationship or even their character development?
Well, the one is just a dunce in the prince, and
sure,
there's, obviously he wants to have a higher opinion of himself, and I guess eventually he comes back later with that. There's that whole scene where he's in Monaco visiting his brother because all of his money gets taken, right? The Ali Nasser character, I don't know, he reminds me, I guess a lot of times Vince or Kyle have done this where the opposing agency's intelligence chief is the bad guy.
He's Ben
Friedman. Or I guess, or sometimes not the bad guy, in terms of, who was the Iraqi one who was actually helped out whenever in protecting family. Anyways.
Oh, yes. Who helped get Kennedy back.
Yes. And then, but again, the Pakistani one in the most recent one of the, the survivor was the bad guy, Taj.
Right.
So it's commonplace for Kyle or Vince to use these the head of the intelligence, I guess the equivalent of Irene in another country, to be the quote unquote villains, right?
I love that. Yeah.
You nailed it on the head. So yeah, I think his, obviously he's a guy who disagrees with the king. He wants this, caliphate. This is really like the turning point in terms of moving away from the Taliban and really bringing in ISIS into this story, which, obviously Vince never saw the rise of ISIS. Kyle mentions that like multiple times, so we're now moving forward in time, bringing in a topic that is current of the time. And he wants to fund these terrorists that are in ISIS and really see some traction in it.
It reinforces the shift to a post 9/11 world. We yes, Vince wrote plenty in post 9/11 world, but this is really reinforcing it with how they talk about some of the Saudi royal family funding Osama bin Laden, and they were ethnically or nationally Saudis, a lot of the attackers. And I feel like it's like the next phase of that, right?
Sure.
They were not stopped, that initial group, with our push against the Taliban. Those same extremist ideologies percolated, and those seeds were planted again. And now we're seeing the second wave of that blossoming through this buffoon of a prince, but also through this very cunning, very intelligent, Machiavellian intelligence chief who actually does away with the prince. He doesn't even want him in his plans. He was only he was a pawn himself. And so I like this Ali Nasser, and like you're saying, this ideology is so clear, and I think it's very Kyle as well to connect to these big ideas. He's much more philosophical, where I feel like Vince would have just beat down on the Saudis. Bad apples, they're kind of rotten at the core, but they talk a big game and they put on a face for the world, and then they pretend to be our friends. Where Kyle takes it to the next level, and this Ali Nasser has this philosophy where he says, quote, "Freedom made the Americans weak. How could society protect itself unless the greater men took charge of every aspect? How could a society be truly exceptional when it was at the mercy of the whims of the mob?" I feel like Kyle's critiquing democracy and American democracy with this character, Ali Nasser.
Yeah, very, very much so. I wanted to ask you how he mentions multiple times this idea that U.S. intelligence, obviously we knew there was heavily Saudi involvement, but that we decided to, look the other way. Like I'm not, was there such a deal? Do you know of like leaked information that there is such a deal? Like I didn't have time to look. This was something I wanted to look up to see if this is true or this is just speculation.
Right. I don't know about it in a research detailed way. I haven't read the whole 9/11 Commission report, but I'm relatively certain we knew the Saudi connections. The Bush family had a very close, even personal relationship with a lot of the royal family, and I think there was some speculation that Iraq, Afghanistan, hunting the Taliban was seen as more of a public distraction, if you will, instead of going after the funding source and the root cause, which was Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia, which we didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. So I do think there were reports and documented evidence that some deal was struck, if you will. But yeah, Kyle's really explicit in saying there was an actual handshake, like an actual agreement to do this. I think it has strains of truth. Let's put it that way.
I wanna look into that more. It got me intrigued to like read more of that stuff and go back in the history of that.
Really smart though to weave it into the thriller genre. It definitely shows he's keeping up with the times and he wants the story to be current.
Yeah, and I feel like those speculation pieces are something that Vince did all the time. Like putting in something and stating it as fact when actually, it may not be proven fact, but most likely is fact.
Which showed his worldview. More than showing the real world, it showed Vince's take on the topic.
Exactly. And a lot of authors do this. Brad Thor does this a lot too.
True. I feel like though with Vince, it's a little different and he's a bit more opinionated. I don't know. I feel like Brad Thor...
Kyle is kind of an enigma to me. I think we mentioned this before. I can't get a feel on, like where he aligns politically, where, how he feels about the state of... I mean, I know how he feels about the state of the world and America, but like, what he agrees with.
Right.
Whereas I feel like I have a pretty good sense of like politically what Vince was.
It was a little clearer with Vince. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that in a sense takes us to Alexander.
It does.
Because he comes in and there's a description of him, the same straddle both sides of the aisle. I actually don't even remember. Democrat, Republican. It's almost like it doesn't even matter because
I think he's a Democrat.
I think he's a Democrat. I believe, yeah.
Which is interesting, would make the new president be a Republican. But Kyle never mentions his party. Like that's what's interesting.
But I was gonna say those characteristics don't even, or those categories don't even matter, because you're creating Alexander as that president who straddles politicians and the political know-how, but also with I'm down to earth and I'm going to take the reality of the situation. And I think that is played out really well in the second half of this book, which we'll get to, where Alexander has to go on a manhunt for Mitch and has to show the world, I want to get this guy too. But he secretly greenlit the mission. He was the one, because of his rage problem, getting so pissed at Ali Nasser, knowing the Saudis are again funding terrorism. Like, President Alexander almost sees like what happened with 9/11 and how we almost, quote, covered it up to protect the Saudis. He's like, I could be pegged with that. 5-10 years down the road? What if my administration is pegged with, you knew Ali Nasser, you knew the Saudi intelligence, you knew this prince was funding ISIS, and you kind of sat on it? He's like, I'm not going to sit on it. I'm going to greenlight some dark shit, and calls Mitch in and says, Mitch, he's like, we're leaving Kennedy out of this. We're leaving everybody out of this. You go as dark can be and go kill these motherfuckers. Essentially, that's what he tells Mitch to do.
And he says, you know that this meeting never happened, and if you get caught, I will have to take you down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. And like, because at first Mitch is like, wait, what are you saying? And he's like, do you not understand? He's like, no, I understand what you're saying, but I want you to say it. Like, I need you to say it. And, in no certain uncertain terms, be as clear as crystal, because I'm on board and I'm ready to do this. And this is when, Mitch has to go. He formally cuts ties with the CIA, puts in his resignation letter. You get this like gut-wrenching scene where he goes to SEAL demolitions and salvage and has to tell the crew that, he tells them he's going on vacation.
He's hanging up his boots.
But they know he's going on some mission, and he has to tell them, well, where I'm going, you can't come. And he's like, well, that's fucking bullshit. Like, just tell me what you're doing. Like,
I love how Scott calls him out.
He does. Scott calls him out. Everyone else
Scott deserves better. Scott deserves better.
Scott deserves the truth.
Yeah, he does.
But I guess
Rap can't give it to him.
No, because he doesn't want him to, get pressured when the inevitable manhunt.
Yep.
So Scott might be the one having to track Mitch down.
Right. But Rap ultimately needs the guys to have plausible deniability. Like,
sure, exactly.
If it's like, they can go out and say, he didn't tell us anything, but he did tell you, and people know that. It's like, it gets weird. He literally wants Scott and crew to straight up say, I do not know anything about this. Like, our hands are that clean. Like, Rap wants their hands that clean that no one could ever implicate them in any of this. But there's friends, right? They go through hell together. And do they deserve to be read in on this? Probably. I don't know.
So who's the first person that Mitch recruits to his team?
Well, it's Claudia before anyone else.
Yeah, it's Claudia, but who's the second person?
He agrees to let her in, and then all of a sudden, I guess the love triangle is back. Every time there's Donatella, there's a love triangle. And at the center of that love triangle is an ice pick.
Well, before he gets to that, he goes down to Costa Rica, and he gets Grisha. But even before we get to Grisha, there's this interesting little short chapter between. We get Mike Nash in the story.
Right.
We also get an interesting tidbit with the president and
Alexander.
Mike Nash, and he's like, "You got to watch out for that one. I think he wants my seat."
Yeah. He tells Irene to watch out.
Exactly, because Irene is pretty much has him deal with all the politicians.
Right.
So I like these little nuggets, these little nuggets that are sprinkled throughout.
It does also say, though, because Nash's job here, I think he picks him up at the airport, drives him somewhere. It's like Nash couldn't really be involved. He can only get a few hours away from the Beltway at a time. He's really dug in on the political stuff of being on the Hill, being at the White House. Like, he's not on the team anymore, if you will.
But so they're having this interesting conversation where they're trying to pick not the logistics side, but the ops side. And he goes through these people and he's like, what? That guy has like is missing an eye. And then that guy, like, he says like the Japanese will lend him something. He's like, yeah, but I can't understand. I can only understand 10% of them. And when he's on the mic, that goes down to like 0. That was funny. Yeah. And then he like recommends like some crazy person. And then finally he comes to Grisha, which eventually Mitch decides to recruit to his team.
Yeah,
I thought that little comedy scene between the two of them was pretty funny.
Yeah, and I kind of forgot it was Nash who brings up Grisha's name. And it's just like, hell no, look what he did to our best friend. And then Nash says, it was Scott's idea.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Like, wow. Scott knows we want the best of the best. And so Scott's not going to hold a personal grudge knowing how good this Grisha guy was. He plants the seeds that maybe we can use him. And we already know Irene thinks she can turn him or use him. So Rap's like, let's give it a shot.
So I guess that's why we had to wrap up Grisha's story in Order to Kill, because I guess he could kind of see he wanted to have this, and having like the whole manhunt or a mission to go get Grisha in the beginning of this sort of makes it less realistic that Mitch would then involve him directly in a mission, immediately, like I feel like in order to give us some time, because that was something we remarked upon when we were discussing the ending of Order to Kill, how that just seemed like really quick, and then for him to like just forgive him, not forgive him, I don't know if he forgives him, but for him to let him go. Did you buy that?
Well, I was going to ask you, we talked about maybe not so much buying it in Order to Kill in the epilogue. I think it was one of our losers we didn't feel was right. But this conversation, I felt was very authentic in how it could have happened, of one operative at this level totally being caught off guard seeing another one, having some small talk where they beat around the bush, the women kind of slink away to distract themselves, and the two men kind of just, I don't know, I feel like it's an honest conversation of like, what have you been up to? I didn't go back and talk to Russia. I haven't had anything to do with Krupin like you asked me to. And he's like, I know that. And he goes, how's Scott doing? Like, I messed him up, but he was a good lad. Like, he like Grisha says, like, it was a good battle. Like, you got a good guy on your team. And then Kara's there, which Rapp saw. He protected the surfer girl. So maybe there is a human side to Grisha where he can care about human life. And I buy all that a lot more. So I was expecting to cringe knowing Grisha comes back and he's on our team and he's kind of friendly with Rapp. I expected it to feel a little cringy when it happened.
A little forced.
But I didn't feel that way.
No.
It worked.
I totally agree.
It's a very delicate chapter.
And I think that's why this first half of the book elevates Order to Kill for me.
Agreed. Absolutely. And the Grisha scene's a big part of that.
Yes. And so you mentioned before, Donatella comes back.
Yep.
And she's been hopping around, messing up with her protection details. She was in Dallas, and now she's in Chicago. And when we see her, she just kills like this random, not random person, but she kills a person the druggie who broke into her house. And I don't know, she just seems like this beautiful woman who's can't, she used to be an assassin. Now she's, what did Mitch want her to do? Work in a butcher shop?
Dude, that line is
classic. That was so funny.
Classic.
He's like, what? You're good with knives and you like meat.
She's skeptical when Rapp offers a job, and she's like, remember that last job you tried to give me? In a butcher shop? Come on. And Rapp's like, yeah, you like food and you're good with knives.
That line had me cracking up.
All right, so let me ask you this. How badly would you want to see a Donatella spin-off series or a book?
I would, and I think I would want to see it when the in-between, when we see her, like right in between when like obviously Ben Friedman recruits her, and then when we see her in, what book is that? The Third Option, when she has the ice pick kill. I would want to see like her time in being used with the Mossad. I think that would be interesting to flesh that out a little more.
Yeah, and then her transition as a spy into the fashion world, because there's also that good scene when Rapp encounters her and they talk about their past relationship. And yeah, a very spicy scene, if you will. I think very separation spicy. Of power, maybe.
Oh yeah, and Anna is there, and then because she's drunk, right?
Right. And Rapp brings her home, if you will, and argues with Anna. So to see like Donatella's perspective on that, of having Mitch out of her life, she's doing her spy stuff, and then Mitch comes into her life, and then it's messy with Anna. She even has a line here where she's like, he never really realized that we were meant to be together. So Donatella really still has the hots for Mitch.
Yeah, he was the one that got away, I guess. I mean, but she's like batshit crazy.
She's nuts. She's absolutely nuts, man.
I think Kyle, in the past, I didn't see her as this crazy. I think Kyle has elevated the craziness.
He likes the quirk. I mean, there's the Kyle.
Maybe maybe that's what's, living in Dallas and being protected by the FBI, maybe that's elevated her, obviously you got to be fucking crazy to be an assassin. But maybe, being taken out of that environment, obviously she's used to living this high fashion ultimate lifestyle, and now she's living in friggin' Podunk. Well, she gets threatened to live in Iowa.
Yeah, Iowa is not Milan, so that's definitely going to mess with your head.
Exactly. There might be a Lake Como in Iowa, but it's not Lake Cuomo.
Lake Cuomo.
Is it Lake Cuomo?
Lake
Cuomo.
Sorry. Lake Governor of New York, or Lake formerly disgraced Governor of New York and disgraced television host.
There may be a Lake Cuomo, but there's no Lake Como. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, dude, that's good. That's good. Dude, I feel this is like Order to Kill Part 3. Kent Black.
Exactly. Another member of the team.
Are we wrong
this was
an
interesting chapter.
It was. But are we wrong to keep bringing up these connections to Order to Kill? I'm like, Vince did that where books kind of bled into one another, but this is really, really, like I said, that connective tissue. Like, it's just insane how much there is.
Yeah, I just think like it's a really good sequel book. Like, I think that's more so than what we've seen in the past.
So here's a theory. He lets Kent Black live with that funny scene in Lesotho where Kent Black's like, can I at least, can I get a ride in your van to the airport? And Mitch shoots at him and is like, get out of here. I don't want to see you again. And Kent Black scurries away. I got a theory here. If you have an interaction with Mitch Rapp and you live, whether he wants you to live or not, you're coming back in another book.
Yeah, odds are you probably are.
Donatella, this Kent Black. I think everyone who interacts with Mitch and lives has to come back at some point. I think that's a Rappism. Yeah,
could be. Very true.
Yeah.
This I wanted to point this Africa. I don't know. It was funny how he's like this. I don't know. There was a bunch of different genres that we got different chapters in a row. I felt like, we had the whole Grisha scene, and then we go to Chicago, and it's like a gloomy night, and we see Donatella kill somebody, and then we cut to Africa, and we're in the middle of a civil war, and it reminds me of like a bumbling Tony Stark, like selling weapons to like both sides.
Right.
And then, they go back to this church, which will be like their base of operations for a little bit of this novel. And who's there but Mitch Rapp? He tries to run away, and then he's like, I don't know how he did it, but Grisha, like, I don't know how this guy did it, but he was able to like get me so quickly, and then boom, there comes a knife, or is it an ice pick?
I think Donatella's got the knife. Yeah.
I wish it was an ice pick. That would be sick if it was an ice pick.
That would have been classic, right up against his
Donatella
temple.
Has a knife, so.
And Kent Black says something like, geez, Mitch, I did everything you said, and you still come after me, but at least you came after me with someone who's smoking hot.
Yeah, please don't let me die.
Don't let me die by someone that's that hot. Yeah. And Donatella goes, oh, I like this one.
That was funny. Yeah, and so that'll set up, the rest of the book.
Yeah.
The one thing we haven't touched on is the Mullah Halabi.
Right.
Who he's now the master player. Nasser has been trying, obviously the prince in the first chapter, he was hoping to meet with, I guess stupidly, hopefully, like he's going to give this money and the Mullah Halabi's going to be there. Like, no, what the fuck are you thinking? That shows his ineptitude. But Ali sets up these a way to meet him. He does meet him, and because obviously he wants to get him aside. But this is interesting to bring up this character because he will become, I'm not mistaken, he's the main villain in Lethal Agent, right?
Right. Yep. Love that connection. And I kind of like his character because we knew the prince was not sharp enough to be the big bad.
Sure.
Ali Nasser is being set up to be the big bad, but as the actual intelligence chief of Saudi Arabia, it's not like he's going to plan direct attacks on America. So there's this budding relationship of where Ali Nasser wants to take Saudi Arabia and aligning that with extremism and the ISIS ideology. So do you buy what Ali Nasser is telling Halabi, look, King Faisal has lost his way. He is not one of us. He is too friendly with the Americans, but he's dying. I can be a man on the inside, connected to the intelligence agencies of the world, and secretly bring you intelligence that you can use as the leader of ISIS. And I can put somebody in on the throne in Saudi Arabia who will play our game. And so Ali Nasser wants to rekindle this pre-9/11 relationship of extremism being funded and fueled by the Saudis that King Faisal has been trying to root out. Do you buy that ISIS leadership and someone this high up in the Saudi government would be working together or cut a deal like this?
Yeah, I think so. But he's going to put him through the ringer, right? He needs to test his intelligence. And obviously, instead of just blindly, Halabi's smart. And he even goes to the first act of sort of Nasser giving him intelligence. He gave him the intelligence just hoping he would get the general out, but actually Halabi actually turns it into an attack on the CIA troop, on the CIA personnel that are there. And he does that because this is now going to put more pressure on Ali Nasser. And it's just like these thinking like two steps ahead, and I don't know, it really sets up Halabi to be an even bigger bad.
Yeah, you're right.
And I had no idea that I forgot that that's where Lethal Agent starts at the very end, begins at the very end of this book.
Yep.
And then we get a whole book in between, right? That doesn't talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah, because it goes to Russia, which is the Grisha stuff. So
exactly.
Yeah, these are all tied together. It's kind of like a wave, going from one to the other, but there's that
connective tissue.
Yeah, exactly, right. Tying it all together.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got the Saudis getting in bed with ISIS. We know they're planning an attack. We've got Rap trying to get a team together to totally go dark and take out the prince who is seemingly behind all of it, and take out Ali Nasser, who's high up in the Saudi intelligence, and the president's authorization for it, but kind of leaving Kennedy out, totally leaving Scott out, sets us up for some exciting adventures with Mitch, Grisha, Donatella, and crew in the second half. So let me ask you, what are your winners and losers? Let's do it real quick.
Yeah, I really like the scenes where we meet the teams, the team members. I like the conversation with Grisha, obviously bringing Donatella back. The interaction with Kent Black was funny and really well written, and obviously all the Claudia stuff. I really like this. I think my favorite thing though is the scene with Alexander, and his obviously he gets embarrassed in his scene with Ali Nasser, but then the meeting with Mitch and setting up this entire operation. I don't know, that was just really cool to me, and showed his bravado, his balls, whatever. So it had to be Alexander for the win for this one. What about you, Mike?
No, I think I'll agree with you, but to add on to it, I'm pretty high on this book, so I'm hoping. It
seals the deal.
Right, exactly. I'm hoping we can close it down in the second half and keep this up, because I don't think there's been a stretch of a Rap book with this little action that I liked as much.
Right. I will agree with that.
Especially Vince's writing. Vince's writing, you needed that spark. You needed some big politician scene. You needed some really super awesome rap kill. The dialogue was good, but could only sustain itself for so long. Or the dialogue would have been really good in one scenario, but the other storyline, you wanted to see action. Like, remember that terrorist training in Argentina? It lasted so damn long.
Yeah.
That was definitely a slow burn, where here, it's kind of a slow burn that I'm down with, because so many cool characters saying and doing so many cool things. So anyway, long way of saying, I just like some of the straight up dialogue, and I like Mitch's transition. Mitch is really, really thinking about transitioning his life to be with Claudia. What does that mean? What does it look like? And I really just like how we're inside some of the characters' heads. Later on, we get inside Donatella's head. This time, we've spent a lot of time inside Mitch's head and with Claudia. So here's one other quote about the two of them. So I like that these relationships are being brought up, being expanded upon, and kind of moving forward, because Rapp says, quote, he thought about his wife and how much he'd loved her, about his unborn child, about what that child would have meant to him, and of course about Claudia's role in their deaths. Were they looking down on him right now? And if so, what were they feeling? Betrayal? Anger? At the fact that every day their memory lost a little bit of its sharpness? Or relief that he'd finally move on? So I just like the fact that Mitch is being pushed to move on. And what does that look like? And dialogue and inner thought process like that really being spot on. It's just crazy to think I didn't need an action scene to carry me through it.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree.
Losers?
I guess the one thing that I thought of, you brought this up, but was you didn't like the narrator for this audiobook.
Dude. We have to address that. That's the elephant in the room right now.
Yes.
Okay.
So Mike didn't realize that he was listening to the abridged version at one point, right?
Sort of. So I had a road trip to New York, and Rosie had some work to do, so she wasn't going to come back with me. So I was like, oh, man, I get like 4 or 5 hours in the car.
I do that same thing.
Sweet.
I do that same thing.
And so I'm like, double time with Mitch Rapp. I'll knock out the whole book like in this 1 5-hour drive. It's going to be awesome. I'm like 5-10 minutes into the drive. I go, wait a minute. This is not George Goodell. I literally pulled off the highway. I had to stop. I literally had to stop and check my phone. I was like, this is not George Goodell. Who the fuck is this? So I look, and he was pretty good. Scott Brick. It wasn't George. I was super disappointed. But I was like, it's okay. I thought Rapp sucked. I thought Rapp's voice absolutely stunk. But almost every other character and the narration was really good. It's just a real bummer when I thought Rapp wasn't Rapp. Right. But here's what happened. So I pulled over to check it. I'm like, just on the off chance there's a second version of the audiobook. Maybe I got the wrong one.
Sometimes there are.
So I looked for a second one. I was like, yes, there is another version. And then I played that. I'm like, George. No, it was Armand Schultz, the abridged version. It was like 6 hours long.
The Brad Thor guy.
The Brad Thor guy. I hate to say it. He definitely does not work for the Mitch Rapp series. I wasn't liking it. I went back to Scott Brick. I don't know if that's because I think of him as Brad Thor and I like it in that context. Maybe that's why it was messing with my brain. But I went back to Scott Brick, finished it up. But yeah, I didn't like learning that there's these abridged versions with 3-4 hours cut out.
I found this out, I guess, when I was reading the book, reading and listening to the books the first time, because I would go in the library, and then there's like some libraries where, all right, the first like 5 books they bought only the full version, and then like everyone after that they only purchased the abridged version. It's like whoever the purchasing agent did was like, oh, here's an audiobook. Like, I'll just get the book is 11 hours.
Just, yeah.
Why are you giving me it's like a 6 hour and 40 minute abridged version? Like, what are you cutting out?
Abridged
I don't get it.
Makes no sense.
This is not like,
I'm going to be honest. It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. Shouldn't exist.
No, they thriller novels. They shouldn't exist. These things are like max 400 and 500 pages, right?
If you take like the Alexander Hamilton biography that's like 2,000 pages long and you make an abridged version, sure, I'm about that life. A thriller novel? What?
I want to know, who listens to these? Who listens to abridged versions of audiobooks?
And I get people are busy. We said that in the beginning of this pod. That's why I do the double time.
Just listen to it on double time.
I'm not going to listen to an abridged. I'm not going to listen. Okay, if someone else had the audacity to take a Vince Flynn book and decide, oh, I think we can cut out this chapter. Oh, well, I think this doesn't make sense. Let's slash that so we can save 20 minutes.
But it was still 60 chapters.
You're a fool.
It's like the same amount of chapters, but then they like cut stuff from it. I actually, maybe when I have more time over the holidays, I'm going to go through and listen to one of these. Maybe I'll do it with this one since it'll be fresh in my mind. I'll go re-listen to it and see what they cut out and get pissed off at what they cut out.
Dude, we're doing it. We're going to do it. How about this? What if we finish the series? Because unfortunately, this is going to break my heart. We got one book left to go. What if we pick...
Consent to Kill.
Right. Maybe our favorite book. Or how about this? What if we pick the most important book in the series and see if there's an abridged, and then do an episode about what they left out?
What they left out. Yeah, no.
Hold on. What happens if we like it?
Well, see, Consent to Kill is a longer book.
Maybe not Consent to Kill then, because that is long. Maybe there are parts you could cut out.
Yeah,
Which
I
book
don't know.
packs a punch? Like nothing can be left out, or it unravels. Memorial Day?
Damn, Memorial Day's like that.
Yeah, maybe. No, maybe you can cut out some of the chasing.
What is Extreme Measures kind of like that?
Maybe Extreme Measures.
I just really want to know who reads this. Like, who doesn't have time, like, to listen? Like, you're listening to a book, so just listen to the whole book.
I would feel so dissatisfied. Like
that's like
okay.
Buying a book and then
Yeah.
saying every third chapter I'm just going to skip.
Right. If someone recommended me the series and I read all the abridged ones and I liked it, and then someone told me I was duped and there were these unabridged versions that have like 40% more content, like an extended cut in a movie, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. What? I would felt like I got scammed by like a Nigerian prince.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Might have to mark
That's
this
so
one
funny.
explicit. I think I dropped a couple of choice words. And I'm in a good mood too. I don't know what that's about. It's usually when I see cover C.
I will have to say, to follow up your point, so I like Armand Schultz as the Brad Thor,
I agree.
and maybe that's because I first was introduced to him with the Brad Thor series, and like I was sort of reading both these series at the same time, so I would jump back between George and Armand. So it was nice to like get this, and I think there was at one point George then hopped onto the Brad, did like a Armand couldn't do one, so you know these guys are busy. I think George has like read thousands of audiobooks.
Right.
But then Scott Brick, he actually read another series that I read. He's also done thousands of hours of audiobook. But it's like it's called The Passage, and it was Justin Cronin. He did this trilogy. Fox tried to make a and they did an awful job of it. I liked it. About vampires, kind of weird. I didn't mind him there, but then when he came over to Mitch Rapp, I was like, get out of here. Go back to The Passage. Like, I don't like you here. I want George back.
Maybe it's if you've heard that voice somewhere else, you're not a fan of it.
Yeah, or we just love George, you know.
Or we just love George. And plus, to me, if you think of just a voice, they're two ends of the spectrum, Armand Schultz and George Goodell. Like,
oh yeah,
I don't think they could be more polar opposites just in how their voice carries. George with that very old man kind of deep, almost melodic feel to it. Like, you know, put Sherry to sleep. I love that story still. Thank you, patron Sherry, for being one of George Goodell's biggest fans in the world. Armand Schultz, I feel like, is the opposite. I almost feel like I'm in a big Roman ruin or a temple, you know, and it's just this wide open space. It's very almost official, like someone's on a microphone giving a speech. It's not warm. It's not fuzzy. George gives me the fuzzy, the fuzzy feelings. Armand Schultz, I just think, is so monolithic, if you will. It's just a very different voice, which I think works for more of the modern Brad Thor kind of geopolitical stuff, where George Goodell's, warmth really works for a rap scene where he's chilling with the boys.
I would agree with that. Yep.
Anyway, so basically to wrap it all up, abridged audiobooks are the cover C of audiobooks.
For sure. Run that as our title. Who the fuck listens to abridged books?
You deserve a nice pick from Donatella.
Exactly. All right. Well, that about wraps up our breakdown of the first half here. Next week we'll be coming to you with our second half. Give you those. We'll talk about cover C. I'm interested to see the covers of this book. I haven't done that yet.
Right. Same.
Give you our final ratings and review. We'll see you next week. Again, thank you to our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. And thanks our newest patron, Kevin B. Please subscribe, rate, and review. You can find us at midrappod.com or on Twitter and Insta at midrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.